then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer.
Keith, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so fun just to have you up here. We were sitting back there, and you're just pacing for
Yes.
this moment.
It's true.
But you know, so everyone has a story, right?
Yes.
And sometimes we put people up on stage, and we hear two-time elite coach, six-star diamond, and people think I was born this way, right?
Right.
And it just happened. But how were you introduced to Beachbody?
Yeah, it's funny. When I think back, I've been a coach for 4.5 years, but what actually got me here started 9 years prior to that. And that was when I was young, fit, and healthy. Life was good. I was a newlywed. My wife and I were expecting our first baby boy. Life was great. And then our world basically came crashing down when my older brother, my hero, was diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive form of cancer. And after 10 months, 3 days before Christmas, he unfortunately lost that battle. And that changed me as a person completely. I went from being the happy newlywed to being the miserable husband, the miserable dad, not who I wanted to be. And I lived in a constant state of fear and worry. What if the same thing happens to me? My brother left behind his 2.5-year-old son, my nephew, and what if the same thing happens to me? What if, we now have a new baby boy, what if something happens to me and my wife is left alone with the kids? And it ultimately ended up about a month before our second son was due to be born in a complete and total nervous breakdown. I was under the covers for a week, could not get out of bed. I was useless as a husband. My wife is a saint. I mean, please, she was amazing. Um, and as I dealt with those issues, and we had another son, and I dealt with that, and I unfortunately turned to food. And I went to the doctors one day, and he said, "How are you feeling with all the anxiety and the depression?" And I said, I'm feeling pretty good. I think I got this under control. He said, okay, that's good, because now I need to tell you that you've put on about 50 pounds, your cholesterol is going up every year, your blood sugar is going up every year, you're pre-diabetic, your blood pressure is high, we need to do something to change that. And so I really thought about that. And the thing that he said that really stuck with me was, if you don't make these changes, the exact thing that you were worried about is going to happen to you. And so I went home that night, and you're all going to boo me. I went on Beachbody.com, and I bought P90X on the payment plan. So don't discount those people. And it completely changed my life. I did a round of P90X, then I did a round of Asylum, which was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I should have done Insanity first. But it really just completely changed my life in terms of both physically, who I was as a person, who I was as a dad, a husband. I'm just forever grateful for that.
Well, and I know the twists and the turns of life didn't end quite right there.
Right.
So I'd like you maybe just to share a little bit more. And then that number 150 also
Yes.
means something. So why don't you just touch on those?
Absolutely, yeah. So during the course of dealing with all of that anxiety and depression, my oldest son was actually finishing up kindergarten, and he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of autism. And fortunately, he was very high functioning, but we needed to get him into a self-contained classroom to have the success that we wanted to see him have. And we were able to do that for a couple of years, and after 2 years in that self-contained classroom, his teachers came to us and they said, we think he's ready to be fully mainstreamed. And we said, okay, that's great, but we're still not sure. So my wife and I started pricing out some private schools for him. And we looked around, and we actually ended up going to the school where my wife went. And we fell in love with it. We did a tour. We took him through the school. Everyone fell in love with it. Okay, let's do this. And I went back, and I looked in our budget, and we literally came up $150 short to be able to send him there. And to have to look my son in the eye and my wife in the eye and tell her we can't do this, that's something that always stuck with me. That is something that I never wanted to experience again with any of my kids. To have to tell them, as a parent, you're always going to have to tell your kids no, right? But to have to tell them no on something that you knew was for their best interest, something that had to do with their education and their life moving forward. And that was something that just crushed me as a dad. And I had just started P90X when this all happened. And literally a week after that happened, I was approached by my coach, Chris Ballmer. You guys know him? So I was approached by Chris, and he said, have you ever considered becoming a coach? And I thought about it, and I said, maybe this is the answer. And my degree is in biology. I started researching right away. And everything I read said, if you're going to start a business and it requires you to pay money to get started, don't do it. It's a scam, right? So I went, I don't know about this. But I said to my wife, this could be the answer. This is what could make up that $150 for us so that we can provide our kids the education that we feel like they need. And so a week after that, I signed up. I didn't order Shakeology right away. I signed up as a coach, and here we are 4 years later. My son just finished up his first year at that private school we wanted to send him to. He made honor roll all 3 trimesters. He was in the chorus. He ran for student government. He is completely changed. And now his 2 younger brothers are going to be joining him in the fall at that school as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You never know when someone reaches out and touches you that life does matter and what happens later on, and you're just a great example of hanging in there in spite of life's turns and those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So any last things you want to share about everyone matters? And
Yeah, I mean, it's funny coming to events like Summit, you really get to know your team and you get to really understand the impact that you can make on people's lives. 8 months ago, we had our 4th baby boy. And one of my
Shalene strikes again.
Shalene, hey, Shalene, thank you. I told her about that.
Fingerprints
by the way.
are everywhere.
So we had our 4th baby boy, and actually, it's funny, one of our diamond coaches that I didn't even know when our 3rd son was born, he lives in Louisiana, I live in New Jersey, totally not a match made in heaven, but he was his godfather a few months ago when he was baptized. And then I remember my very first summit a couple of years ago, talking to one of my diamond coaches, and it was the first time we had met in person. And she's a cancer survivor, and she's a cancer fighter. And her name's Julie Miller. Where's Julie? And she looked at me at Summit, and she said, "You are my game changer." And that's, I think, what really hit me, what this coaching thing is all about. Yes, you want to hit Success Club. Yes, you want to do those things, but it's about truly making a difference in people's lives. And she stopped me this morning again, and she said, "You are the reason I continue to fight." And it just makes everything, sort of come full circle. When you think about the success that you've had and the experience that I've had over the past 4.5 years, and we're closing on our dream home in hopefully next week. But when you come here to Summit and you meet the people that you are actually able to personally touch and impact their lives, it's just an amazing experience.
Well, Keith, thank you for being willing to share that, and congratulations on all your success. And
thank you.
Everyone, Keith Wilson.
Thank you, guys.